Hello, hello to my True Blue crew. Thank you so much for spending part of your WIP Wednesday with me. This is just a time to make progress on our quilting projects or just slow down and chat with some friends. So thank you for joining me. Now, I refer to applique as the A word because I don't speak the A word very often. And I have taken on a special project that includes applique. And so it's not my favorite. And whenever I have a tedious chore, it's always much more fun to have some friends around to keep me company. So I thank you for joining me as I work on this little bit of applique. And why am I doing applique if I dislike it so much? Well, I had a new long arm customer and she has this fabulous quilt. It is, and I hope I didn't ask her if I could show it, but it's her, I'll show you the bottom. It's her for her grandson that plays hockey. And so she has some personalization sections that she wants to add to this. She's an artist. She does pastels, chalk drawings, all sorts of artistic work. And now she's doing this applique quilt. She designed it and laid it all out, and it's going to be so much fun to get on the long arm. But first I have to get these personalization sections. She just brought me these embroidered patches. They're done on quilting fabric, but just these rectangular sections that she wanted added on the quilt. And I had told her before, when we spoke about this project several weeks ago, that, I just do the quilting, but she brought it to me, and I was trying to push back nicely and, say that she could add the applique after I had quilted all the layers together. But that didn't sink in that I was saying no. So I got stuck with doing the applique, and I figured it's better to do it before I start the free motion quilting all around those areas. And she just assumed that I would do the whole binding process for her too. So this has turned into a much bigger project than I usually do for my long arm customers. I'm much happier to just long arm the layers and you take care of the binding and any other finishing details. But sometimes we just like to help the community out without making too much of a fuss. And so I started sewing this patch down, and I managed to sew the layers together. So I need to unstitch a bit and, of course, lay the quilt out so it's only one layer so that I can do this applique section. And I'm just whip stitching these patches down like you would a binding with a little whip stitch there on the edge, and it's easier for me to see these stitches in between and get it undone, and so I can start again. And at first I was just going through this one layer because this white is on top of the background quilt fabric. So I could have just, taken a bite out of that top layer like you do when you're binding, but I didn't. Okay, so I was not careful enough. I thought I could just stab through all the layers. Okay, so let me get that off the edge. And rethread my needle. See if I can see. Luckily, it's light thread, so if I hold the light thread over the dark border, I shouldn't have too much of a problem threading that needle. leave the tail pretty long. Okay. And just one layer there. Okay, here we go. So I have to concentrate on this a little bit. It's hard to talk and do this stitching at the same time. Let's see. We have Quilting on here, and please forgive me, I forget first names with some of these. Now I'm totally blanking on your little screen name, but good to see you, Quilting on, and then TNA Tampa. Yes, I do plan to include a fee for all this extra work beyond my basic long arm rate. But, you know, luckily people that make such big assumptions are few and far between. So that, and I certainly could have pushed back and said, you know, and taken these patches off and said, no, I'm only doing the long arm bit. You'll have to figure out the additional patches and sewing them down. But she kept saying how her eyesight's going bad and, you know, just sob story. So we'll see. And then the other kind of funny part is she started talking about a project that she wants to do for her granddaughter, since her grandson is getting this big quilt for Christmas. And so she's describing this other project. Her granddaughter's a dancer, so instead of a hockey player, it's going to have a dancer. And she's thinking it'll be a nice body pillow. And I'm thinking, you're not asking me to make a whole pillow. And she, oh no, just the quilted front. Good, because that's over and above. Yes, I just quilt. I've made a few pillows, but again, I like my 3D straight line, or my flat straight line, not so much on the garments and the bags and the pillows. Okay, and then I'm trying to come up right in the corner, and then I can turn this all around. And this is the hard part, where it's on the edge that you don't have a grip for. And I also want to kind of protect the privacy of that family and blur out the name. So how is everybody doing here in late October? We have the Quilters Life Summit is going on for one more day, and my presentation is at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So check out the schedule. There's a link below for the Quilters Life Summit. And you can check out my workshop on monochromatic quilting. Kind of this idea of using, you can see my banner back here, where I used all sorts of different blues to plan out my quilt palette. So I'll talk you through the steps on how you can quilt with just one color. And I'd love to hear what you think of those quilting summits. They get a lot of interest. It's a lot of fun as a quilt teacher to be part of these virtual events. And see so many different techniques. And people are sharing some good ideas for Christmas gifts. Yes. It's always a relationship when you have a new long arm customer, and figuring out where those boundaries are, and having those conversations, because I'm happy to help make someone's vision come to life. I really enjoy that. Hey, Tasha, how are things? And some of the fun seminars in the Quilters Life Summit, there was one on 3D flying geese, which would be fun. A chapstick holder. I was just talking about how I didn't like to do 3D objects. I like flat sewing. I'm intrigued by the chapstick holder. Yeah, and Quiltanon says, I know adding a label is important, but I don't like hand stitching them on. When I can remember, I cut down on that, and I attach the label in one corner of the binding so that I have only half the square to stitch around. But there's many of my quilts that I forgot that process totally, and so now I have to go back. And you can get, iron-on ones too. I suppose that would save you a step if they're, especially for the ones that I've made that aren't being used right now. They're samples for my trunk shows and things, which is fun. I just got a new email from a guild. I think she's in Indiana. So I may be able to do a Zoom presentation. So if you are part of any online group that needs a speaker, I'd be happy to show off some of my quilts. Just shoot me an email and we can discuss the particulars. I'm waiting until I retire from full-time work, and then I want to be a traveling quilt teacher and apply for some of these big shows that have teaching opportunities, like Road to California or QuiltCon or something like that. So in the meantime, I'm just online. Okay, I've come to the third corner. So let's see if I can get this all around the other way so I don't. And I know people might be able to. I'm not keeping this totally private, but mostly. Hi, Rita. Yes, I know iron-ons eventually come off. Nothing's permanent, but at least it would be there, and then I could maybe someday finish up the hand stitching on them. But as you can see, this doesn't take a huge long time to actually just get it done. except when the needle comes unthreaded. Oh, too fuzzy. I need a nice sharp edge again. With snip off a little bit of that thread and try this again. I'm usually pretty good at all those years of cross stitch and DMC thread. Nope, I'm not. That's another good reason to keep your tail long, is that it's less chance of it getting unthreaded. Hello, Lori. Oh, that's another good idea. TNA Tampa. Is it Tina? That would be too logical. Says, I sew, here, let me highlight that. I sew labels on the backing, and I do have a customer, another long arm customer, that does that. She puts the label onto the backing, and of course then I have to obsess and measure and make sure that it's far enough from the edge that I'm, that I've got the backing loaded properly and the top, placed properly, so that I don't accidentally leave that as part of the unquilted extra backing. But no, she always gets it in the right position. So and then Snowcap Quilts asks, do you print your own labels, and with what printer? And I have a video from a while back where I talked about my labels. Let me quick grab that for you. And I can, because I actually handwrite my labels. I found it, so let me just grab the link. And for Snowcap Quilts, check the comments, and I just added a link to a different video, and that talks about the pens and the fabric and stuff that I use to do handwritten labels. But I have used EQ printable was a type of printer paper fabric-ish. It wasn't a true, muslin or anything. And I use Micron, Pigma, right? Micron. It's buried in a box. You'll have to watch the video that I shared. And yeah, and Rita says she made labels part of the binding. So yeah, last year, as part of our Wild West mystery quilt from Cotton Cuts, they sent us little almost like tags, t-shirt tags. And so I just sewed that into the binding. And so it was, only an inch. But you could do that. Like I said, sometimes, if I remember, I will put the label, right in the corner of my quilt when I'm putting the binding on, and that way 2 edges of the label are sewn into the quilt, and I can hand stitch the other 2. And I've heard of people that actually make a triangle and sew the 2 edges of the triangle in the corner of their quilt, and that way you can either leave it as a pocket or stitch that 1 edge down, so it cuts down on the hand sewing that you have to do. And you'll have to let us know first names. JL Missions Nurse, Jill Y, says she likes applique but do less of it. And Quilting On has tried the triangle label. Yeah, I've done a couple quilts with machine applique. One had like 1,000 leaves in the border, and so that turned me off pretty quick. And then I didn't like the tracing and the placement part of trying to do a pictorial applique quilt. So, you know, every technique has its fans and the folks that don't like it so much, but there are so many fun aspects to quilting, and we all get to use pretty fabrics and threads. So to each her own, his or her own. So for the folks that are just coming in, I'm supposed to be long arming this quilt, but the customer at the last minute decided to add some patches, and I'm not showing the full thing because it's the person's name and privacy issues. And she had just pinned them on, and rather than cause a delay or force her to do things later, because she started talking about how she can't see real well and some of this other stitching is pretty shoddy. I just said, yes, I will sew those on before I long arm it. So I'm going above and beyond for this customer. And yes, I mean, I know I'm the business owner because I was saying earlier also that she included the fabric, the half yard of fabric for the binding, and said, and you can put that on too. Well, not really included in my services that because I've never figured out how to attach binding when the quilt is still on the long arm. I do need to investigate, but I don't want to practice that technique on someone else's quilt. I need to try that on one of my own and figure out the process, and then I can do that for someone else. But I bind by machine, so it's a fairly quick process, but it will increase the final cost of her project. So that is that. And yes, I could have said, sorry, no, you'll have to find out someone else for that. But I hate disappointing people. So. Oh, I think TNA Tampa is talking about how to measure to put your label on the backing before you quilt it. So you measure whatever the extra is of your backing plus some more to get it towards the center of inside the quilt, so there's no danger of it not being quilted. Because I was saying that's always my fear when I have a customer that brings me a backing that has a label already attached is I always double and triple measure everything to make sure I'm getting things lined up so that it actually stays on the back where she wanted it. You know, if you're going to do that, err on the side of caution and get the label more towards the center of the quilt and not right down in the corner. That would make me too nervous. Okay, so I finished this first sewing on of the applique square. So like I said, I've got it's just all tacked down there. So let me bring this to the back so I can tie it off on the inside of the quilt. Okay. So there's that aspect of it. And like I said, it's such a fun hockey player. And again, I need to do some strategic placement. I'm trying to think. Hang on. Because I don't want to, you know, this is for a kid, and I don't want to give internet weirdos any way to. So what I will do is cover up the okay. That covers up the school name while I am on camera. Where there's a will, there's a way. Okay. So now I have to do this. Yeah, isn't this fun? She did like a face up here in the face mask, and then, you know, he's got his gloves on, and there's a, you know, a big hockey stick, and these are obviously his school colors for his jersey. And yeah, we're just, and when I have applique quilts, I tend to just do some outline stitching. So we're not going to do anything really in the jersey other than, you know, go around all of these elements. And that should be enough with standard, you know, modern fabric and batting. It won't shift too much. We're going to do just some curly cues or circles, loops, loopy meandering in the background. Yes, TNA Tampa, putting, you know, random placement of the label is fun. Okay, so now I need to find some red thread. Did I have, oh, and at some point in the last year or so, I have used red. So it was sitting right here by my, I think I had a red binding on something, so I had some red thread by my machine. Didn't have to go hunting too far, but where did I put the needle is the question. A little bit of thread can go in the trash. And at one point, I mentioned earlier that I've had lots of practice threading needles because I did a lot of cross stitch as a kid. That was my first fiber art. And I can usually just eyeball, but somebody said I thread needles backwards because I hold the thread still and I force the needle over thread. And they thought they usually aim the thread through the needle like you would for a sewing machine, but that's it. And so then I'll do my quilter's knot. So I hold the tail of the thread and I put the needle parallel and I just wrap it around 4 or 5 times, and then I pull the needle through so that that knot is at the bottom of my the thread. And let's see, which way are we going to go around this guy? So I'm going to start way in the middle and then come out one of the edges. And that will bury the tail underneath there. And I've got my portable cutting mat underneath me. So if you see me stabbing things, it's okay because I'm not marking up the table or anything underneath. It's a cutting mat. And yeah, I don't look very coordinated while I'm doing this because it's, you know, it's in the center of the quilt and I can't like gather all the fabric to get a grip on any of this. So we'll just and I'm just doing the whip stitch like I would a binding, grabbing the fabric underneath and coming out through the edge of this folded patch. So I hope you guys are working on something that's a little more fun these days. I actually have to sit down and get organized, make a list of projects because I don't have anything that's like just easy piecing right now. I've got a project that I work on that's a kit that's at the putting all the blocks together following this really intricate diagram. So that's not something I can easily do on camera because there's a lot of thinking, checking, double checking as I make sure I get the, you know, it's like we made 3 variations of a star. Some have light background around the whole star. Some have dark sections and a light section, and others have, you know, have the dark section in a different position. So you have to make sure you get it all turned the right way. So that's it's been a fun project to work on at my the shop I frequent has open sew days, and so it's a good project for those open sew days. At least it was when all I was doing was cutting, you know, 150 half square triangles and sewing them together. But if you watched my shop haul video from last week, you'll see that I have a new 3-yard quilt. So I want to throw those reds and blue fabrics in the wash because it's going to be patriotic and I don't want the red fabric to bleed. Oh, very nice. TNA Tampa is making a lanyard and a small crossbody bag for a quilt show. That's fun. Going to a quilt show on Friday. I'm assuming it's in Florida since your username is Tampa. Or does that refer to some other aspect of your life? Our local quilt show is, I'm trying to figure out, I need to turn this whole thing to get to the other side. Our local quilt show is going to be in February, March. Oh, it's Misty has the Tampa username. Very nice to meet you, Misty. I will have to write that down so I remember. I was on a live stream last night with Dara Thomason, who is running the Quilters Life Summit that I mentioned. My presentation for Quilters Life Summit is tomorrow, and I was working on some Bear Paw charity blocks. She is doing a block drive, so if you want to make some Bear Paw blocks and mail them to her, she's collecting for a it sounds like an organization in Canada that's similar to Quilts of Valor. Oh no, Rita lost her mind. She is going to make a puff quilt. Oh, and then put the puffs are all batiks. Yeah, one of the island batik ambassadors that I follow, because years ago I was an ambassador, and so I got to know a group, and a lot of people continue for many years, and a gal on the team did a puff quilt for one of the challenges. So those look like fun projects. I'm sure, just like everything, you hit that dip when you're like, what in the world was I thinking taking on this project? You're all excited at the beginning, and then you hit the dip, and then it's nice to have it finished. But I did see, Rita, that you had a video recently about a puff quilt, so that's excellent. And Misty is in Tampa and going to a show in Clearwater because the Quilted Twins are vending. Are they from LA? I remember being at a show here in Arizona, and there was a shop across the aisle, so I stared at them for 3 days of the show, and it was Quilted Twins, and they were actually twin sisters from LA. Am I thinking of the same gals? And Rita has made several puff quilts, so if you have questions about puffs, talk to Rita. Yeah, Misty, talk to Rita about puffs. She'll get you all situated. Okay, last fourth side, 2 more corners, and I will have the applique done, and then I won't have to touch applique for a while. And I don't know. I'm just calling this applique. I don't know that it's, I mean, it technically, yeah, you're sewing patches to another background, so that fits the definition of applique, right? And on my podcast this week, Quilting on the Side, we talked to a pattern designer, Tourmaline and Time. Laureen is her name. And she has designed over 700 patterns that she's done for magazines and things. Oh, it was so interesting to talk to her. Hey, William, good to see you. Yeah, Misty, it must be a different Quilted Twins. But that's really interesting that there would be two shop names the same. Or maybe I'm just confused and they don't really live in California. On the show circuit all across the country. William is the patch guy, so yeah, he knows all about applique. And we have a new visitor saying they just stumbled onto this page and love it. We'll look into the podcast as well. Yeah, the podcast is Quilting on the Side. We do a lot of business talk. So if you are interested in turning your quilting hobby into a business, we have lots of tips for you. And we also talk to a lot of quilters, just about their journey and what they like to make and how they got started. So lots of fun stories there. Tasha was on. She commented earlier tonight. She was our guest earlier this season, so you can check out her episode as well. And William, I saw you had a new coat on. Tell us what you do with all of those coats. Do you just keep them yourself, or do they have a destination for other? Do you make them with other people in mind? I think they're fabulous. He's in a tweed phase. 60 or more 5-inch squares for Rita's puff quilt. That is a commitment. A friend of mine was doing a puff quilt several years ago. I haven't seen her in a while. But she was also making it a weighted blanket. So she had the some little beads, foam beads, I guess, from the craft store. And she was measuring them out to make sure she had, the right quantities of the puff stuff and I guess it wasn't the same puffiness. It was more the beads and walnut shells and these other lightweight beads. And oh yeah, William's making coats because his hangers need a job. And that is all the explanation that's necessary, just because you felt like it, right? Okay, I think that is the last stitch I need on that patch right there. So we are going to call this good. And then I wanted to get the patches on tonight because Saturday will be my next sewing opportunity, and I can make good progress on the long arm if I have the patches done. So I can just get this around to make a knot on the back. Okay, now I will take this off camera. Like I said, I'm trying to protect this kid's privacy. I don't know how well good a job I did, but we will make sure there's no pins there. And this was my other fabric, and I will lay that off to the side. Let's see how we are doing. Like I said, the only other, small project that I have going on, and it's not necessarily a small project, are my temperature quilt days. Yes, William, I think that's a very good investment. If you rent or buy an airplane hanger, I think that would be a wonderful sewing studio. I might want to go in on that with you. But so I didn't iron all these. I was thinking I could sew some rows together because I have June done. This is the beginning of July. I had April and May here. So May has 31 days and June only has 30. So I need to do another, right? Yeah. And here is the first quarter or first third of the year is already sewn together. And these are going to be horizontal rows. And I did see someone that had done a temperature quilt. Hey, Donnell, good to see you. They did a temperature quilt, but it was continuous. It didn't have, they figured out how many blocks they wanted in each row with and I didn't see a month marker. So they just it wasn't 31 squares across. It was, whatever, 20 or so. So anyway, I've got this project. I need to iron these rows and get my spacer blocks. So this isn't in a position that I can work on it right now either. So like I said, I need some scrap pieces that I can just, when I get the itch to sew and don't really want to follow a pattern or anything, I can just sew them all together. But all that stuff is labeled and ready to go. So now Rita's putting her puffiness into my temperature quilt. No, I'm not going to make it puffy. You can certainly do that. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, the two colors, which we do, which we see with July. Well, I've got 3 colors there with the peach, the orange, and the red, as we went from 90s to the hundreds to the above 110. So that's summer in Arizona. Yeah, that was funny. So we had quite a drop in temperature after all that rain a week or so ago. And people were laughing that, the monsoon is supposed to be August, September, and here we are at the end of October getting all sorts of rain. We got some sprinkles today. I'll have to make a note on my temperature log. Did I hide so I don't forget that today was a rainy day. I'm just filling in our crazy. We had 5 days in a row of rain. And that is super, super unusual for Arizona. Oh, and cold up north where Donnell is. She says she's had rain since the weekend and it's in the 40s now. No, don't say heat, Rita. Up here in Phoenix, it's 80s all week long. Beautiful. And then a temperature quilt, Resplendent Dynamo. Tell me your first name so I don't have to keep using your screen name. Unless you want to be resplendent all the time. That works for me too. She's going to make a puff, she, no assumptions. When they have their first grandchild, that would be a good temperature quilt. Yeah, a lot of people have done that. And they even, I mean, there's temperature information online, so you could go do the research for your birth year or the year you got married or the year you graduated from high school or college or whatever milestone you want to, whatever year you want to celebrate. Yes, that rain was quite an event, Rita. And she said, poor Rita is going back up to 96 degrees again. She's much further south than I am. So that's why we are both Arizona girls, but much different temperatures. And so that is the weather report. I am using a sheet that I got from the Moda website to put all my temperatures in. And then I already selected all the colors for each temperature range that I'm doing. I'm just doing 10-degree increments to make it easy. And I was bored one day when I was downstairs, so I grabbed the markers and color coded it, just to give you, that visual reference is pretty quick. Oh, Donnell had an ice storm the year she was born in April. Had an ice storm. Yeah, I lived in Colorado in college, and we had snow in April, this slushy mess, on the night of our big formal graduation dance. So that was no fun. And then torrential rain on my college graduation day. It was crazy. And then we went back and had a reunion, and it rained at our reunion. So we said it's our class curse. Shui. And she's in Florida. So glad you could join us, Shui. Oh, too many emojis. You're fine. Nightbot gets sensitive sometimes. And Rita has never done a temperature quilt. Yeah, you just have to, when you find a design. I like some of the cross stitch ones that have leaves on a big tree. That was fun. Shui, are you a quilter or crafter? What's your pastime? And like I said, I was going to write that down. Misty from Tampa. And Shui is resplendent. I don't promise to remember, but writing it down gives me a better chance. Yeah, just that little bit of hand stitching on those applique labels gave me that needlework bug. So I may have to. My daughter picked out years ago, she picked out a cat cross stitch. And I'm looking across the room at a cross stitch I did in high school and college. It's a sampler, an alphabet sampler, and it has the year 1990 on it, and lots of dusty rows. So very 90s color scheme there. But I had fun working on that project. So every so often I get the itch to do another cross stitch project. Anyway, my daughter was about 10 or 11, and we were in Michael's and wandered down the cross stitch aisle, and she picked one up. And by the time I had sorted all the colors for her, she was bored and didn't ever pick up and actually do the project. But I'd have to take it to the I would have to take the pattern to the copy store and like blow it up 250% because my eyes can't read those little charts anymore. Oh, yeah. I wonder why, Misty, now that you say that your screen name is usually made by Misty, I have seen you in other comment sections. Oh, Rita, I'm glad you're getting seen, and speedy recovery. Well, Shui, you are right at home here. She dabbles in lots of fabric crafts, the textile arts. I am interested in is it Kawandi that is a lot of the visible stitches on cloth? That's so interesting. That would be fun. And some of the sashiko designs are really interesting as well. So yeah, so much to enjoy. Well, I've been sitting here jabbering for about an hour, which is my limit on a Wednesday night. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and check out the link for the Quilters Life Summit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my presentation tomorrow. It is the monochromatic magic. So you can find the link for a free ticket. The videos will be available until the end of October, but if you are like me and get busy and can never watch these things in the time allotted, go ahead and invest in the all access pass, because then you get all 3 days of videos for as long as the website exists. So Donnell is saying that Kawandi, Jean from Kept in Stitches, showcases that sometimes. Well, that is fantastic. We'll have to organize a lesson or a sew along or something. Yes. Everybody have a great week, and we will see you soon. Happy stitching.